This is Brian Sawyer from Bigfoots of Michigan, and you're listening to Let's Find Out with Diego.
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, we're going to be diving into our guest's new book, Delusions, Smoke and Mirrors of the UFO ET Paranormal Enigma. Let's prepare for a thought-provoking exploration as he delves into the realm of alien, UFO, and cryptid phenomena. Could it be conceivable that we have unknowingly fallen prey to a deceitful force, one cloaked in sinister intentions and masterful trickery? As we delve into this book, prepare to embark on a journey that challenges your perceptions and invites you, the reader, to glimpse a world where mysteries may lurk at every turn. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a new and awesome friend to our show, Ronald Kinsella. Ronald, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. I've been looking forward to our discussion for many weeks now.
Thank you very much, Diego, and it's a pleasure to be on your show. And as you stated, the title of the book, immediately one would think that it's debunking the entire thing. It's not. What it is looking into or peering into the very strange anomalies, certainly the creatures, the cryptids, the massive volume of differences. And this is what led me into thinking ahead of a new theory. I don't think it is brand new, but certainly I think some of the ideas I put forward are. It's like Sherlock Holmes, I suppose, in a way. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. He has to sit there and look at the pieces and try and fit them together. They don't entirely, but it makes it stronger, the evidence of what I am suggesting in that book.
You know, and I completely understand what you're saying, because you, as a former radio presenter and me currently being the podcaster, you've interviewed many people possibly in the same field. And sometimes a lot of people will have the same type, not the same type of experience, but they'll have experiences, but will have a different type of look of what it was, what it meant to them, or what it is that they saw. I say this because not every story fits the same. Just like talking about a puzzle, there is not one final answer to what it is that we're looking for. And if you don't mind, my friend, because I think this is a very important part of the story and definitely the book. If we can go back in time and talk about the experience that changed your life, and because it not only did it happen to you, but it seems to be something that's been happening to the family, correct?
Yes, some of them, yes. Yes. The initial interest came not so long ago, perhaps I would say 15 years ago, when I was bold enough to come out with it. By then, the internet was growing in stature, and people were coming out with their experiences, and it gave one confidence. But the incident that initially happened was in 1982. Now, firstly, there were some things that occurred before that, but the main one was in the winter of 1982, where I was abducted. I will call it abducted. Once, I was taken up from my bed through the ceiling into this dark thing hanging in the sky. It sounds crazy, but I just managed to just zip through it into this very strange object. I cannot discern what it was. People say, can you remember the shape? I can't. It was just a great big dark thing hanging there above the house. And I found myself in a wheelchair, a modern wheelchair. It looked all very modern in this room I'd have materialized in, or I had arrived in. However, they took me up, and they were doctors. I refer to them as doctors because they weren't, but the environment around me was very sterile and looked like a hospital room. And these men, 3 ahead of me, were very strange because they wore armor. From head to toe, they were covered. I couldn't see a thing of them. Very modern, very strange. But there was one behind me, and he was the one in charge. He was the one who spoke. But for some reason, I couldn't turn to see him. I wanted to, but I couldn't. It wasn't paralysis. It was just this very strange kind of power that held me there. And it completely prevented me from turning back. I don't know why, but he suggested an operation to be performed in a nutshell, and I was horrified. I begged. I did not want this operation. He was insistent. He spoke pure British, middle-aged, very authoritative voice. No, it has to be done. Ronald, it must be done. And he produced this utensil. It looked like, imagine a pen with a nodule on the end. Silver. It was silver. And he pressed it on the top of my left hand, and he knocked me out. And I awoke, I don't know how long after, but I was thrust out of this thing in the sky. I was falling from it. But what they were doing, they put me gently back into my bedroom on my back, and I felt the thump of the mattress. That was horrible, you see. I felt the bump, or the thump, and I felt a static kind of energy all over me, which dissipated. And that was it. And I was physically fit, absolutely physically fit. And that's why I refer to them as doctors. And when they left something else. Now, this confounded the encounter because there was a huge head of a Cheshire cat on the ceiling of my bedroom. It looked like a hologram. To me, it shimmered. It was rather like a hologram, and he was ugly. His teeth were all shown. He was grinning down at me. He didn't say anything, and then he just went. And it took me many years after that because, 1, I couldn't work out what they were. 2, I couldn't work out what on earth they had done. And 3, I couldn't understand that people were talking about aliens, but they looked nothing like these. And when I did my research, people had different experiences. The aliens all appear to be different. They are set in stone, more or less, now. The greys are in vogue, very popular. It's just strange that back in 1982, and perhaps thereafter everywhere, the greys weren't very popular. The descriptions of the aliens varied enormously until they became a kind of cult. So that is the initial interest of this subject. This is what spurred me into the paranormal. I didn't want to. I didn't ask for it. And the nasty thing is, I loved science fiction. You're young. You love Doctor Who. You're a kid. You're imaginative. This went completely against me. Fortunately, I had the good sense not to speak about it at the time. I didn't. I told my brother, and that was it. I didn't want to talk about this. There was no scarring. I had checked my body in the morning. There was no scarring. There was nothing I could see. This operation, nothing. It's very weird. Very weird.
And I was going to ask about that as scarring, or if they live any implant on you, some sort of tracking device. But you mentioned something about the description. You said they were wearing a type of uniform. I've known some testimony from witnesses that they saw something similar to what you described, but also there were others there too. It's almost like, so just as an example, if you were to take the ones with the uniform, they had a certain duty. Then there were the other ones that were the actual doctors or surgeons. And then it's almost like there's a very militaristic chain of command. Now, were there any other type of creatures there, or was it just that one type?
There was just one type. And the interesting thing is, I had a fear then of policemen and doctors. So I did wonder later on, much later, as we become hopefully a little bit wiser to it, not of what they are, but certainly the logic behind it, whether they had instilled this scenario so that I would be compliant. I don't know.
I mean, okay, so which brings me to this, and we're definitely going to dive into your book because it's a very interesting subject, because I kind of thinking that you and I kind of may fall into the same thought pattern of these things with the same theories. You're an artist, and have you ever sat down? And I know this is a very touchy subject, and I apologize if I come off being insensitive. I don't mean to, but did you ever sit down and try to recollect in your mind, and then try to draw or sculpt these creatures, so just to I guess show somebody, or to definitely know, yeah, these are the ones?
I did do, not immediately, no. That came much later. As I said, about 15 years ago. Not even that. I think the first time I ever illustrated them or composed them was perhaps about 7 years ago. 7 years ago. And even that isn't correct. It is a vague impression of them, because I couldn't remember entirely exactly what every piece of outfit they wore, what it would look like. I couldn't remember, and I could only see more or less the left side of the room. The right side was quite oblivious to me. I wasn't concentrating on that, even though I was turning to try and face the one in charge. He was polite, but very forceful, very insistent. It's rather like a headmaster. You listen to them. You will do as you're told.
Of course, especially in that situation, they have all the power at that point. And one last question about your experience: the way they communicated with you, was this verbal or was it telepathic?
I cannot say. I don't know. They were covered, and I couldn't see him, so I don't know. I have no idea. His words were sharp, clear-cut, and precise. So I don't know.
Wow, no, I understand that. So it was the way this thing was speaking. It was almost like you were talking to a human, because
That's right.
they weren't struggling with the dialect or the English language. It was just straight up.
He had perfect English.
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess they've been here long enough to actually learn the language. I mean, they've been here for thousands of years. So, with these type of encounters, my friend, and I mentioned it probably in the pre-interview or earlier in the episode, a lot of these encounters seem to be different with most. I've heard more negative stories than positive. Out of the many people I've spoken to, I've only heard one real positive story. In your opinion, these extraterrestrials or these beings, are they trying to pass as aliens? And I mean this because is there some sort of dark force, or for lack of a better word, perhaps demons of some sorts, maybe a Luciferian type of force behind these bizarre events?
I do consider that. To be honest with you, I wouldn't know. It's only theories. Someone stated that due to the negative nature of the experience I had, and it was negative for me, I was a negative person. I can assure anyone and everyone I was the happiest of souls. That I had no worries, no cares, so it was nothing to do with that. Looking back at it, I still cannot say about them. I mean, what had they done to me? I mean, I didn't know then about the tracking devices they put in people. I was completely ignorant. This is the time before the internet, and it was looked upon a subject as being taboo. So you have to be very careful. We all know that. People of yours and my respectfully age understand the absolute horror you would face if you'd announced this. So that was completely horrifying. Even so it's an insurance policy on their part, isn't it? They know that you're not going to speak about it, and if you do, you're going to be ridiculed. That goes against us, and it benefits them. But as for their presence or darkness, it is possible, but I might be wrong. You see, it could be completely misconstrued by myself and others that this is negative when they think what they're doing is perfectly fine. He said it is for my own good. So what on earth he meant by that? And this was 1982. I have never forgotten the dialogue. I have forgotten the way it was delivered, but not the main consensus of it. I have never forgotten it.
No, and I don't think you ever will. In a way, it's kind of terrifying when you have a force that's taking you against your will, and they're telling you this is for your own good. I'm going to have to, in my opinion, disagree. I don't really think it's for your own good. I'm not speaking for you, but if it were to me, if it's not something that I'm inviting into my life, then it's not good for me.
I agree totally with you, and I actually have stated that in Illusions, because what force, if they've been here for a long time, they would know us very well. They'd know our mannerisms, our fears, our phobias, and yet they still do it. And another factor we must take into consideration. I actually question this. If they can knock you out prior to an alleged operation, how is it they can't knock you out prior to seeing them? Why do they want you to see them? Because they want you to see them. They wanted me to see them. And this is the mistake I made of the Cheshire Cat, the head of him, was that perhaps they were trying to confuse the issue that when I was conscious, that if I went to see a psychologist, they'd tell me that you're just getting confused. This is Alice in Wonderland. It's very nasty, but was he an insurance policy on their part? Just that last deathly kiss, goodbye, is nasty. But I think it is a darkness. I'm going to come out with it. I do. I have to be careful because I respect people's opinions, and I do. I agree that people accept the fact that they may be friendly, they're here to help, but I can't see any of that. This is what I've illustrated in Illusions. I can't see it. There's no direct pattern towards that because we have absolutely not one shred of evidence or proof, and that is how it or they like it.
As you're saying what you're saying, I 100% agree with you. I think by now, and I'll say, and I'm going to throw this guess out there. Let's just say humanity maybe has been around in our state for the last 20 to 30,000 years, and we've evolved to what we are now, whether through their influence or through some sort of type of evolution, whichever you subscribe to, I don't know. But I think by now we would have seen evidence of something that would have been good for us. I mean, I'm not seeing anything other than something we're doing ourselves.
That's right. I also realized, certainly working on Illusions, is that the encounters that many people have, they're telling them different things. They appear differently. So they're telling some, let's take the 1950s, for example, their concern, the alleged concern of atomic then warfare, and how they were trying to warn people on the streets, I was one of them, that we must stop this. And then it moves on to the 90s with these, now they are now set in stone, the Greys. I think Whitley Strieber's book helped to push that ideology forward psychologically, so that whatever's doing this can imprint these in people's mind or pass themselves off or it off as these new in vogue aliens. I'm not saying they're not real. I'm just saying I think these are masks. That was environmental issues. So they're telling us, each and every one of us, different things. Are they confusing us? They're confusing us. This is what I've estimated, so that we don't look in a particular direction while they're doing what they're doing. And what they're doing, we don't know. But obviously, evidently, they're making us look this way and that way. Even a point that someone rightly stated, that when this nuclear war issue was raised, the atomic warfare, that I stated they'd done nothing, and they said they've shut down a number of silos. So yes, they might have done that. They might have fired at a number of missiles and destroyed them, but they haven't shut every one of them down. If they were concerned, so concerned for the fragility of Earth and our own actions, they would have nullified them without us even knowing. We would build more, they'd nullify them again. We'll build more, they'll nullify them. Job done. We can't make them work. They've won. They haven't. It's an illusion.
I'm in silence not because I'm trying to digest what you're saying, because it's almost like I know what you're saying is true. And one of the things that comes to mind, and I think you've possibly come as well, with our world leaders, and I'm on then 100% in the opinion of they know about what's going on. and they're also involved in the deception as well. So I think they really don't have a choice but to cooperate with these forces in order to deceive us, because what choice would they have, really?
That's right. I mean, look at the Congress. You know, they're trying to open up the floodgates for disclosure, and they're never going to give it. They are not going to give it. They never will. Because all this nonsense of going through the Senate, and it is, because these corporations who have, and I believe they do have, downed craft, relics of them, the pilots as well, they probably have them on deep freeze, they will just shift them to another location. They've got enough time to do it. They're never going to let us know. Disclosure must not happen because the true masters of Earth are the leaders. They can't have anything else above that. And I sometimes wonder if they know something very sinister and dark about these entities. There's something not right, because when you hide something, it is to cover something very bad. I mean, unless it's a surprise, it's not going to be a nice surprise like a Christmas present. It's all wrapped up with a ribbon. You know, these things, I think they're very sinister. Either they know something very dark about them and they're fighting them in private, or they're just not let us know because they have no power over them. There's no control. They're just playing ignorant so that they don't have to have any responsibility if the inevitable happened.
Perfectly said. Is there a reason why these forces, and I would say aliens, but I'm just going to say in generality forces, working in the dark the way they are? And I probably know the answer to this question, but I'm very interested in your answer to this question, my friend. Do we pose some sort of threat to these extraterrestrials, meaning that they are not in plain sight, but they're using tactics and tomfoolery in order to get what they want out of us without us seeing them?
Yes, they evidently need something from us. If they are tired of us, they could have wiped us out quite swiftly. They could create a germ that would be 100 billion% effective. You see, it's very hard to exterminate people. We can try and do it with nuclear weapons, but you will have people who survive. They wouldn't have a problem. So this is the very troubling aspect of it. I think they need us for something, and that is very worrying. There's something they need us for, although they don't treat us very well. The respect is completely gone there. The morals, if they've been here for a long time, as I believe they have, certainly, there's no respect, because they just do as they wish. They feel they have the right to do it, and a superior race would, or a superior force would. And look at us with nature. It goes without saying, doesn't it?
It does. And one of the things that always pops into my mind is it is in my belief that they've been living here, or they live here in plain sight. They might be taking other shapes, other forms, just to observe us, to see what it is that we're doing. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this book, The Lost Book of Enki, and it talks about, I think it was an ancient Sumerian tale that they actually came to Earth, and there were actually our creator gods who eventually get a version of humanity that can help them do something, which I think at that point was mining for gold. I think there was some sort of environmental catastrophe in their planet, and they needed us to do the work for them. And then somehow, humans always do something, and we thrive even though the world's destroyed. We still go on. We're kind of like the like intelligent cockroaches in a way. Well, we still go on. Now, why do I say that? Because if we're talking about what is it that they want, I mean, do they need us for labor? Do they want to get us to a form of evolution so they can inhabit our bodies? Or maybe down the road, I mean, it sounds kind of gross. Are we going to be food for them?
Food, yes. You see, they wouldn't need us as slaves. I have difficulty believing that. If they're so advanced, they could build robots. You see, they could just build slaves. They wouldn't need us for that. So we can rule that out. Okay, the second one, I don't think so. The third one, yes, I sometimes wonder, blood seems to be the issue. I will state it politely, through the cattle injuries, and also human. This is what's not disclosed. And how many more people have been treated in the disrespectful manner that I have seen? I've catalogued it in my book, but there are no photographs. I've been respectful and not shown the photographs, because this is one of the gentlemen who perished very strangely at the hands of a very dark and disgusting force. Yes, I don't know. I mean, there is something, but, you know, trying to gain insight into that is impossible, because, as I stated, when people are taken, they're told this, that, and the other, so we can't exactly see the wood for the trees. We're blinded, and I believe this is intentional on their part. So what is it? If it's not food, it's something else, and I don't think that's very nice. Someone did mention containers. That disturbed me very much so. This wasn't me. There was someone else who mentioned, very interesting, that we are containers, vessels, and that gives off a rather nasty biological aspect to it, doesn't it? Something very nasty. It makes me think of that wonderful X-File movie, the original one, the first one that came out. I thought of that. I thought, well, I hope these pathogens, or whatever they are, this alien force is not thinking about that, you know?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. And it's interesting because we both thought about the same thing about being food. And I know you and I were close in the same age. And I don't know if this series played in the UK, but in the early 80s, it's played on NBC. It was a science fiction series called V. So the long short of that one is these aliens came to Earth and they looked just like us. And then as the story continues, a reporter sneaks into the spaceship, and then you start seeing these aliens take off their masks. They're actually reptiles, and their main mission was to take our resources and also use people for food down the road. And the reason I bring up reptilians, because at least here in the United States, the subject of reptilians seems to be gaining momentum. Also, with added feature to this is a lot of sightings of dogmen, Bigfoot, and paranormal. And if, in my opinion, a lot of these things I think intersect, and they might just be the same thing, but under a different costume, if you will.
Yes. The V you refer to, the 10-hour miniseries, that was created by Kenneth Johnson. I've actually heard from him. I've been in touch with Kenny.
Wow.
He allowed me to use an image in the Digital Demon, because I asked his permission. I've been in touch with him a few times. Brilliant man, and brilliant series. Yes, whether they are of the same thing but wearing different guises, yes, this is what I suggest in Illusions. Because it's funny, isn't it? They don't remain in our airspace for long. They can't. And what's very interesting also is that I reflect that in the 1950s, when we look at these aliens, you will observe that when they met the abductees, their craft more than not landed conventionally. You know, the landing gear came out and they descended from steps. And this is what's interesting. This is what I figured out. I spoke about this at the Awakening Conference this year. I was privileged to speak there, very honored. I had suggested that the beaming up occurred after Star Trek became a hit. So are these things using psychological tactics to modernize something in vogue so that they can keep up with the times? That would suggest, in a way, a lack of imagination on their part. Don't get me wrong, or its part. They are incredible engineers, but they seem to, or appear to, lack something. Another thing I observed about this is that the many different shapes of the greys and the stars of them. Now, as you suggested, I was an artist. I'm an artist, yes. I did some images of these, and it's interesting how people have stated that's not how they look. They look like this. That's not how they look. They look like that. Now, I also came to appreciate the fact that is this force unable to maintain an original copy? It would be rather like the artificial intelligence or AI art we observe. With that, as we know, it cannot hold the same image twice. It can try, but it can't. So this force, which I've published in that book, Illusions, which is I worked this out. It cannot hold the same image. That's why the werewolves appear differently. Thin, large. One was even reported to be wearing an earring, would you believe? This is from the researcher Paul Sinclair, a brilliant researcher here in England. But certainly, it got me thinking that the reptilians differ, the werewolves differ, the dogmen, Bigfoot differs. They all differ. So what exactly are we dealing with? Now, I understand that people who don't agree with this, they will contest it, but I must reiterate these are my own opinions. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I respect your opinions because we have no proof. It is only a theory, a hypothesis. But you see where I'm going with this. The airships of the 1980s, the exotic airships, this is in Illusions. They always appeared, and this is not my own research, this is other people who have written about this firstly, a little bit more advanced of what we could achieve at the time, but we get there. So they keep upping this program, this technological scale. They go up and up. You know, we now have jets and they have triangular ships. What's going to be next? The saucers were certainly in vogue. And another thing, mostly everything was silver in the 1950s. We only have to look at the B movies. Respectfully, I don't think they're B movies. I think they're classical films they've made, you know, marvelous. They're silver. But you see, an intelligence wouldn't need silver because they'd have force fields. They would have developed force fields. Any kind of energy to rebuff any harsh elements, either from outer space, interdimensional, or here, you know, and it goes on and on. But I consider myself to be a thinker because I sit back and I try and think about these things. I might be wrong, but they're interesting little pointers to note nonetheless.
No, it is very interesting. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to, we're talking about, of course, the delusions and the trickery. Well, we're going to revisit real quick the Series V. We're going to talk about what happened. We already know what happened there, but the scripts that come out from Hollywood, and I'll use this as an example. Before we had streaming movies or the movie theaters to this level that we have now, there was a radio play back in, oh my God, I'm going to say 1950s, War of the Worlds. We're all very familiar with that one, and the way it was presented, if you didn't catch the very beginning of that radio show, everybody thought they were actually being invaded by extraterrestrials, Martians, if you will. And there was a big panic. And that play was also not only done in the United States in English, but it's also done all over the planet in different countries with the same results. People were killing each other. There was riots. Why do I say this? Because at that time, we were not conditioned to be prepared for such a thing. Where I think now it's the and I'll use this metaphor for the water and the frog. The frog doesn't know the water is boiling. It just has to get warmer and warmer. By the time it's done, the water's boiling. Are we being conditioned, but not only by Hollywood, but maybe these forces to eventually down the road, will there be a main extraterrestrial posing as like a false messiah of sorts? And we'll be willing to do whatever it tells us to do at that point.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Marvelous point, Diego. But the Orson Welles narrated the live broadcast based on H.G. Wells' wonderful War of the Worlds. I've read that book so many times. And yes, you're absolutely correct. It created a pandemic of horror and terror. Conditioned, yes, I think so. This might be so. I did wonder, because we're quite robust, us human beings. We're very resilient to many things. We're very clever, very ingenious. I'm proud of my race. Is it possible, I thought, that they're talking about now, because things are failing, they can't seem to get a grip of us because we have imagination. We're very ingenious at solving puzzles. You can put someone in a very grave situation, and if it was a group of them, one of them would find a way out. So perhaps we are a force not to be reckoned with. This is why I wondered about the idea of having us chipped. Brain implants, once they get in there, they will have control over us. And when they have control of us, it makes them gods. So that Will this presence arrive when this has been sanctioned or made mandatory? You know, just to calm the dogs. You know, I don't know. You have to think about these things. But certainly there is a darker aspect to this entire thing. I have never believed personally, and again, I'm not treading on any toes, I've never believed in a peace treaty or any of this nonsense. Mm-hmm. Nothing of this has ever materialized. They watched us being slayed and slaughtered through World War II. They had the Foo Fighters then. I believe these were electronic eyes or some kind of visual apparatus that was observing the war. They did nothing. There were disasters, you know, they do nothing. So we are being watched, certainly observed and snatched up for reasons I have no idea as to why, but they're doing it. So it's very sinister when it's kept hush-hush. And I do believe that the powers that be have a notion of this. They're a little bit wiser to it. Margaret Thatcher actually stated to Georgina Brunet, a wonderful author of her book called You Can't Tell the People, she interviewed the Prime Minister about the UFO case, and Margaret Thatcher was recorded to say, you see, firstly, you need to get your facts right. Well, she knew that nobody could. But once you do, you'll know why we can't tell the people. Now, that does not sound very nice, does it? It doesn't sound very good. Those were her words. So I think perhaps they're either being kind to keep us from a very ugly nightmare, or they are powerless, certainly powerless to do anything, so they're casting a blind eye to it. Not virtually, they would study this, but they're much wiser to it than we give them credit for, I think, most certainly. The true powers that be. We have to bypass the people who elaborate the enormous wealth of lies that circulate. Certainly the internet has given rise to propaganda and nonsense, trickery, fakery, photographic false images, you know, things like that. So we have to be very, but it does seem to be very dark, to my mind anyway, and this is the conclusion I draw in the book Illusions.
Yes, and then I'll leave us with this, because I know we're going to get close to the hour here, and one of the things you said something, and you're talking about hiding this information, and they're no longer doing this out in the open. And I bring this because of this, because it's been very disastrous for humankind, and it's just is my opinion. And like I said, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody's faith or anything, but I believe that every time there's been some sort of intervention by extraterrestrials, and I'll go back to thousands of years, so perhaps these extraterrestrials may have been worshipped as gods, but anytime there's been interference by the gods, it's always been very disastrous for humankind, to where eventually they decide, well, this didn't work, we'll either destroy it by a comet, a flood, or a disease, and start all over again. So I guess perhaps it's easier for them to control us and keep us in line doing this in the shadows, per se, instead of doing it out in the open.
Absolutely, yes. It is being done in the shadows. I mean, they've changed the acronym, UAPs now. And what's interesting is that they suggested that they're not referred to as aliens, non-human. Now, why on earth would they state that? That is even more disturbing. They're not referring them to aliens. These old words we've used or we're familiar with are being changed. Non-human. What on earth does that mean? We know what it means, but from their own definition, there's something not right about it. There's something very sinister about this. Very sinister indeed. And, you know, I will continue to keep thinking about it and trying to dig, you know. I haven't seen them for a long time, thank goodness. I've seen the UFOs, what we call UFOs. I don't know what they are either. Close up. They're not pinpricks of light. These were very close up. The last case was in 2016, I believe the 9th of April at 11:15 p.m. We saw them, and the way they moved was strange. I watched them. I observed very carefully, and I watched them move, but we have got nothing like that. This is not back-engineered technology. I gave an example of that and people, you see, it's created this a kind of dogmatic opinion that people believe it's military. I do not, because it's rather like this stuff coming from another planet or an interdimensional approach would be so removed from our own science. It'd be rather like us, as a prime example, handing the Victorians one of our modern cell phones and asking them to reproduce it. Oh, they'll try, but they couldn't do it. They just could not do it. So anyone suggests that this is back engineered is nonsense, I believe personally.
So if it's not reverse engineering, sort of say,
It's
and yes. Now and I lied. I was going to say this last, but one more thing. Now, with the technology that we have now, and if it's not reverse engineering, are they using what one would say was called fallen angel technology, where there's a point where this is where it goes to the theological part. There was a part when angels came down to earth and showed humans forbidden technology, which was not favored by the main god at that point. Is this something that we're developing on our own, or are they just spoon feeding us thing and teaching us how to make these terrible weapons or these fantastic aircrafts?
That's a very good question. When I stated that this tech cannot be reverse engineered, I'm referring to anti-gravity mechanisms, flight, traveling at the speed of light, these are beyond it, moving with such gravitational forces it would kill us or crush us in an instant. There might be something compatible that they are leaving to enforce this electronic prison they plan in the future, possibly. Certain microprocessors may have come. We first had transistors, and it's strange how when they collected some of these ships, the Roswell being the Crown Jewels in 1947 crash, I believe that happened, by the way, and I believe they did have the pilots. I don't believe the autopsy. Let's just pass that, okay? But they retrieved the pilots and the ship. But it's possible that there were some nuggets. And isn't it strange that when these things crashed, and this happened on a regular basis, those ships, and I suggested this in the Digital Demon, always crashed not on mainland. They crashed in the wilderness, but just enough to be commandeered by the military. Never in a street, never in a city. Strange that, isn't it? And is it possible that the ships had to differ in appearance just as the pilots, so as not to raise any eyebrows or suspicions that the same species was having the same problem in crashing? That, what you've just suggested, is a distinct possibility, Diego, yes.
You know, it just takes a split second to clarify my mind, because you are correct, because I can't think of one instance, now that it has not happened, where it's happened in a city or in a town or in the middle of a football field. It's always out in the boons somewhere, in a mountain, in the desert, in the forest, and then which is easy for military types to retrieve these things, and nobody would be the wiser. But I really appreciate you bringing that up to light. And for the listeners of Let's Find Out that would love to get the copy of Illusions, Smoke and Mirrors of the UFO ET Paranormal Enigma, where can they find more information about that book, and where can they find more information about what it is that you do?
Well, the book can be obtained from Philip Mantle's Flying Disc Press. This was made possible through Philip Mantle. He's been an absolute gentleman to my brother and I. He's supported us. He's helped me throughout, as other kind gentlemen have done too. But Philip has been the main hub of this. It can be bought on Amazon. It's an audio book as well, and I love the American who narrates it. He's got a kind of tongue-in-cheek voice. I love it. So it's ebook, paperback, hardback, or the audio book. And if you want to know more about my brother and I, we have a website at www.thekinsellatwins.com. That's the KINSELLA twins.com. And you can even see my artwork on there. Certainly, as you mentioned, the reptilians, they are on there.
Perfect, my friend. And I'll tell you this, I'll leave you with this, that this has been a very, very interesting conversation that we had, and you've given me a lot to think about. And you've also taught me a few things, and I really appreciate you spending time with me. I know you have a very busy schedule, but thank you very much for being on the show, and I would love to have you come back when you release your next book.
Thank you, Diego. And I believe we're all little cogs. We all need each other to help try and form this picture, this jigsaw puzzle which we're trying to sort out. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania. All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.